The wind howled through the narrow streets like a warning. It was a bitter winter morning, dark and quiet and merciless. Snow blew sideways in the icy air, stinging like needles against bare skin. Storefronts were shuttered, sidewalks empty, and low gray clouds sagged over the small American town as if the sky itself was tired. Half a mile away, up on the highest hill, a mansion of glass and stone glowed against the storm. Its windows burned with a steady golden light. To everyone below, it was just the big house on the hill, a place they pointed at when they talked about wealth, power, and lives that would never touch their own. Down in the snow, a little girl walked alone. Her name was Nora Morgan. She was 6 years old. Her faded red dress was hidden beneath a puffy coat that had lost most of its warmth years ago. Her boots were soaked through. With every step, cold water squished around her toes. Her feet shook, then went past shaking into a strange numbness that scared her more than the wind. Her brown hair, tied back in a crooked ponytail, was crusted with frost where it clung to her cheeks. Her lips had turned a chalky blue. She held a small backpack tight against her chest, as if everything that mattered in her life might be inside it. She had been walking since the first pale hint of light touched the horizon. First to the bus stop near the tree line, where her mother usually stepped off after the night shift. Then to the edge of the factory road, where the trucks came and went. But her mother was nowhere. Her mother, Nora Morgan, had not come home the night before. Nora worked the overnight line at a factory just outside of town. No matter how tired she was, no matter how sore her hands were, she always came home before sunrise. She always kissed Ella's forehead and whispered, "I made it back, baby." See, the world did not win today. Always. Until this morning. Now the world felt like it was winning. Ella's teeth chattered so hard her jaw ached. She whispered into the wind, just to hear a voice. "Mom always comes home," she said. "She always does." A memory surfaced, sharp and bright against the cold. One night, when the heat in their apartment had cut out again, she had curled against her mother under every blanket they owned. The lights had been off to save the electric bill, and the only glow came from a cheap nightlight in the corner. "If you are ever scared," Nora had said, brushing hair off her daughter's face, "you find a kind adult. A teacher, a neighbor, a police officer. Someone who will listen. And if you cannot find anyone, you go to the big house on the hill. The man there is nice. He helps people, even if he does not look like it." Ella had never met the man. She had only seen the lights of that house from far away, warm and steady when everything else around them flickered. Now she had run out of neighbors, out of bus stops, out of ideas. The big house on the hill was all that was left. She turned toward it. The climb felt endless. The hill was steeper than it looked from downtown. Snow came up past the tops of her little boots. The wind pushed against her with each step as if it wanted to send her back where she came from. Her legs burned. Her lungs hurt. Her breath came in short, painful gasps that made her chest tighten. She wrapped her arms tighter around her backpack and kept going, one small foot in front of the other. At last the mansion appeared through the white. Tall iron gates. Stone walls wrapped in snow. Dark pines creaking overhead. It looked like something from a storybook, but not the soft kind. The kind where the castle decides who is allowed in and who is left outside to face the storm alone. Ella reached the gate and stopped. There was a small black camera mounted on the post. A tiny red light blinked. She lifted her head and stared up at it. Her vision blurred. She was not sure if it could see her. She was not sure if anyone cared. A brutal gust of wind slammed into her. She staggered sideways, caught herself on the cold metal bars, and clung there. Her fingers felt thick and slow. Her knees trembled. Her thoughts started to drift. She did not think about school or cartoons or the doll she did not have. She thought about her mother's voice saying, "If you are scared, you find help," and about the fact that she was more scared than she had ever been. Her legs finally gave out. She sank down in the snow, curling into herself, arms wrapped around her knees, head tucked in. The world dimmed around the edges. Sounds grew muffled. Even the wind became a faraway roar. On the other side of the gate, an engine hummed to life. The front door of the mansion opened. A tall man in a long black overcoat stepped out, a leather briefcase in one hand, a gray scarf around his neck. His name was Lucas Hale. He was 39 years old, a self-made billionaire who owned companies that stretched from New York to Los Angeles. Screens on Wall Street reacted when he moved a finger. Whole markets trembled when he spoke. But in that moment, none of that mattered. He was just a man who saw something small and wrong at his gate. A shape in the snow. He frowned and started to walk. Then he saw the little boots, the thin coat, the small body folded over itself. The briefcase slid from his hand and slammed into the snow with a dull thud. "Hey!" His voice cut through the storm. "Hey!" He broke into a run. Ella's body began to tip forward as her muscles finally let go. Lucas reached her just in time, dropping to his knees, catching her before her face hit the frozen ground. She was light. Too light. He could feel the bone through the wet fabric of her sleeves. He shrugged off his overcoat and wrapped it around her, pulling her against his chest, trying to share whatever warmth he had. "Hey, can you hear me?" His voice dropped, deep and gentle. "Come on, sweetheart. Stay with me." Her eyelashes fluttered. Her small hand lifted weakly and grabbed a handful of his shirt. "Sir," she whispered, the word barely there in the freezing air. "My mom did not come home last night. I am looking for her." Then her hand went limp. Her eyes slid shut. For the first time in a very long time, something in Lucas's chest lurched in a way that had nothing to do with numbers or risk. He tightened his arms around her and stood up in one motion, cradling her as if she were made of glass. "Open the doors," he shouted toward the house. "Call the doctor. Now, get the main fireplace going." All the way, he carried her through the gates and across the courtyard, his expensive shoes slipping slightly on the ice, his breath coming in short, angry bursts. Staff rushed to pull open the double doors. Warmth and light spilled out into the gray. Inside, he laid her carefully on a wide leather sofa near the fire. The oversized coat slipped back from her shoulders. A small backpack tumbled to the floor with a soft, heavy sound. Lucas dropped to a crouch and opened it. Inside he found torn gloves, a plastic lunchbox with crumbs and one lonely cracker, and a folded piece of paper. He smoothed it out with careful fingers. It was a crayon drawing. A woman with tired eyes but a bright yellow smile. A little girl in a red dress. They were holding hands under a big sun. In the corner, written in shaky letters, was one word. Home. He stared at it, the firelight flickering over the waxy lines. "Where is your mother?" he murmured. "And why were you alone in that storm?" He did not know it yet, but the answer to that question would not only change the life of this little girl and her missing mother. It would change his. If this kind of snow-covered beginning already touches your heart, make sure you follow this channel, subscribe, and share this story with someone who still believes that one small act of compassion can change everything. Now, let us return to the main character. Warmth. That was the first thing Ella felt when the darkness finally let her go. Not the biting heat of burned skin, but a deep, steady warmth that wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. There was a soft golden flicker behind her closed eyelids. Firelight. The air smelled like cinnamon, wood smoke, and something clean and expensive that she could not name. She blinked her eyes open. The room around her did not look real. A high ceiling with carved beams. Tall shelves lined with books. Huge windows edged in frost. A wide stone fireplace where flames moved behind a black grate. She lay on a leather sofa near the fire, wrapped in a thick blanket that almost swallowed her whole. A man sat beside her. He was not smiling, but the hard edge she had seen through. The snow was gone. His dark hair was slightly out of place now, his scarf thrown over the back of the chair. There was a mug in his hands, steam curling up in front of his face. His eyes, which had seemed sharp and distant at the gate, were softer now, focused only on her. "You are awake," he said quietly. "That is good. You scared us for a moment." Ella's fingers tightened in the blanket. Her throat felt dry and scratchy. She did not answer. He held out the mug toward her. "It is just warm water," he said. "No tea, no sugar. Take small sips. There is no rush." She pushed herself up a little, the blanket slipping from her shoulder, and reached out with both hands. They were still trembling. He did not move away until he was sure she had a good grip on the cup. The heat pressed into her palms. It hurt for a second, then settled into something comforting. "My name is Lucas," he said. "Lucas Hale. You are safe here, Ella." She blinked. "You know my name?" He nodded toward the floor. Her backpack lay open beside the sofa. The crayon drawing she had made of herself and her mother rested on top. "You wrote it on the back," he said. "Ella Morgan." He paused, then added, "I am glad you came to the house on the hill." Her eyes filled slowly, and she had to look away. Can you tell me your mother's name? He asked. She stared into the steaming water. Her voice, when it came, was small and rough. Her name is Nora Morgan. And do you know where she works? He asked gently. Ella swallowed. At a big place, she said. With loud machines. Everyone wears bright vests and hard hats. There are a lot of lights at night. She goes when it is dark, and she always comes home when the sky starts to turn gray. Her voice shook on the last word. Except today. Something flickered across Lucas's face. He glanced toward the tall windows, where the light outside was still heavy and pale. A big place with machines, he repeated. On the edge of town, with lights that stay on all night. He stood, set his own empty mug on a table, and crossed the room to where his phone and a thin silver laptop sat. His movements were quick now, practiced. On the screen, rows of names and numbers appeared. Ella could not see them clearly, but she watched his jaw tighten as he scrolled. Hale Industrial Holdings, he said into the phone when someone answered. I need employee records for the Riverside Assembly Plant. Search for Nora Morgan. Line worker, night shift. There was a pause. A faint clicking of keys. Yes, sir, a voice replied. Nora Morgan. Assembly line, scheduled for overnight production last night. Did she clock out? Lucas asked. Another pause. Longer this time. No record of her clocking out, sir, the voice said. Her shift is marked as open. There is no incident report on file. No one has logged her as missing. It is likely she left without checking out or is still. Lucas cut in, his voice going colder. Do not finish that sentence, he said. Put the night supervisor on standby. I want access to security footage from the employee entrance, the rest area, and the loading bays from midnight to 4 in the morning. Send it to my private account in the next 10 minutes. Yes, sir. He ended the call and stood very still for a moment, the phone hanging at his side. In the firelight, his expression looked carved from stone. Ella watched him, her hands wrapped around the mug, her feet tucked up under the blanket. Did I do something wrong? She asked suddenly. I am sorry I came here. I did not know where else to go. He turned back to her at once, the harshness gone from his face. No, he said. He walked back and knelt so that his eyes were level with hers. You did exactly what your mother told you to do. You were scared. You found help. You came to the big house on the hill. Her eyes shone. But my mom, she whispered. What if she is lost? Lucas took a slow breath. We are going to find her, he said. There was no drama in his tone, just a steady promise. I am not going to sit in this house and hope someone else cares. She works in a factory that exists because of my money. That makes her my responsibility. He straightened and called toward the doorway. A woman appeared almost instantly, his assistant, tablet in hand. Have the car brought around, Lucas said. We are going to Riverside. He glanced at Ella. Make sure she has a coat, boots that are dry, and something warm to drink. The assistant nodded and hurried away. Lucas looked back at Ella. You started this, he said, and for the first time there was a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. I think you deserve to be there when we finish it. Ella clutched the blanket tighter. I can come, she asked. Your mother walked into the night for you, Lucas said. Today I walk into the storm for both of you. You will not be alone. Minutes later, the great doors of the mansion swung open again. The wind rushed in. Snow swirled around the steps. Lucas stepped out in a fresh dark coat, and Ella walked at his side in a borrowed jacket and dry boots, her small hand tucked into his. The world outside was still white and unforgiving. But this time, she was not facing it alone. The black SUV cut through the snow like a dark arrow. Inside, the heater hummed. The world beyond the tinted glass was all white and gray and blowing ice. Ella sat in the back seat, buckled in, wrapped in a borrowed navy coat that was still a little too big for her. Someone from the house had found dry socks and boots in a guest closet. A travel mug of hot chocolate rested in her small hands. She held it carefully, afraid to spill a drop on the soft leather seats. Every few seconds, she pressed her forehead to the cold window and watched the town slide by. The little grocery store where her mother sometimes bought discounted bread. The bus stop where Nora usually stepped off in the mornings. The narrow streets that led to their apartment, now half hidden under drifts of snow. Lucas sat in the front passenger seat. His assistant sat behind the wheel, focused on the road. The dashboard screen glowed with a map. A small green arrow moved toward an industrial zone at the edge of town. On the screen of Lucas's phone, a new message appeared. Security footage. Employee logs. Shift reports. He opened the files without speaking. Grainy black and white footage from the Riverside assembly plant filled the screen. He watched lines of workers in reflective vests and hard hats file through. The employee entrance. He watched Nora Morgan pass under the camera. Her shoulders were tense, her hair tucked back under a cheap beanie, her hands already stained with grease. Timestamps moved forward. He saw her at her station, hands flying, movements efficient. He saw her glance up at a clock and then down again as a supervisor walked past. He watched as the other workers changed out at the end of their shifts, one by one, but Nora stayed. Hours ticked by. In the small break room, he saw her sink onto a bench for a moment, rubbing her temples, then stand again when another worker entered. He saw the supervisor gesture toward the line and point at her. He did not have to hear the words to understand. More footage. The camera in the rest area shifted, badly angled, cutting off part of the floor. The last clear image of Nora showed her leaning against a locker, eyes half closed, trying to steady herself. Then the picture jerked slightly, and the lower corner of the room vanished from view. After that, only the empty bench and the humming vending machine. Lucas felt something hot and ugly rise in his chest. He had built Hale Industrial Holdings on efficiency, output, tight schedules. He had read about overtime in reports and signed off on temporary extended shifts for critical deadlines without leaving his glass office in the city. He had believed what managers told him because the numbers looked good. Now he was watching what the numbers had cost. He locked the phone and stared straight ahead. Is that where my mom is? Ella's voice came from the back, small and unsure. In that big place? We are going to find out, Lucas said. He did not turn around, but his voice softened. We are almost there. The town began to thin. Houses gave way to wide, flat lots and chain-link fences. The dark shape of the Riverside assembly plant rose out of the snow, long and low and made of steel. Towers of light shone over the parking lot, even in the storm. Smoke and steam drifted from vents, blurred by the wind. The SUV rolled up to the main gate. Security guards straightened when they saw who was inside. The gate swung open immediately. Workers on a smoke break turned to stare. Lucas stepped out first, coat whipping in the wind. Ella followed, her hand held tightly in the assistant's. The difference between them and the workers around them was stark. Designer wool and polished leather on one side, faded jackets and scuffed boots on the other. The plant manager hurried out to meet them, face pale. Mr. Hale, he said, slightly breathless. We were not informed you were coming. If we had known, we would have. You would have done exactly what you are doing now, Lucas cut in. His tone was calm, but it carried. Where is the employee entrance camera feed stored? In the security office, sir, the manager said quickly. We have already pulled it for corporate. I assure you, there have been no major incidents. There has been at least one, Lucas said. Show me the rest area. Now. The manager swallowed and nodded. He led the way through the heavy doors and down a corridor that smelled of oil and metal. Machines thudded on the other side of the walls. Overhead lights buzzed. Workers moved aside as Lucas passed. Some recognized his face from news articles and business magazines. Others only understood that the most powerful man connected to their paychecks had walked into their world unannounced. They stopped in front of a metal door. This is the employee break room, the manager said. But I am sure there is nothing. Lucas pushed the door open himself. The room was small and tired. A vending machine flickered in the corner. A row of dented lockers lined one wall. A narrow bench sat in the middle of the floor. On the ground beside it, curled on her side, lay Nora Morgan. Her skin was ashen. A sheen of sweat covered her forehead. Her breaths came in shallow, uneven pulls. One arm was tucked awkwardly under her, as if she had fallen and never gotten back up. Mom! Ella's scream split the air. She broke free from the assistant's hand and ran across the room, dropping to her knees beside her mother. Her little fingers grabbed for Nora's, cold against cold. Lucas crossed the distance in 3 strides. He knelt and touched the side of Nora's neck, then her cheek. Her skin was hot to the touch, her pulse fast and faint. She is burning up, he said under his breath. Sir, the manager began. If she chose to rest in here and did not clock out, that is really her responsive. Lucas looked up at him, and the man went silent. Call an ambulance, Lucas said. Now. The roads are slow, Mr. Hale. The storm has Forget it, Lucas said. He slid his arms under Nora and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. My car is faster. Nora's head lolled against his chest. Her eyes fluttered but did not open. As he carried her out of the break room, workers in the hall stopped and stared. Some of them looked away, shame flickering over their faces. Others watched with wide, stunned eyes, as if they had never imagined that anyone this powerful would carry one of them in his arms. Not one person had raised an alarm when she did not come home. Now the man at the very top of the chain was running through the snow, holding her like something precious. Ella trotted beside him, one hand clinging to Nora's limp fingers, her breath coming in frightened bursts. "Hold on, Mom," she whispered. "Please hold on." The SUV doors slammed. The engine roared. As the vehicle shot back out into the white streets toward the nearest hospital, Lucas Hale stared out through the windshield and made a silent promise. Whatever they found on the other end of this drive, this would never happen in his house, in his company, or in his name again. The emergency room doors slid open with a hiss as the SUV pulled up to the curb. Cold air rushed in when Lucas stepped out, still holding Nora in his arms. Her head rested against his chest, her skin hot through his coat. Ella scrambled out after him, clutching the sleeve of his jacket with one small hand. "Help!" Ella cried. "Please, somebody help my mom." A nurse at the intake desk looked up. For a second her eyes widened in recognition at the sight of Lucas Hale, but his expression left no space for small talk. "She collapsed on the factory floor," he said, already moving toward her. "She is burning with fever. She has been working overnight shifts. She did not come home." A team of medical staff hurried forward with a gurney. Lucas laid Nora down as gently as he could. Wires and tubes appeared with practiced speed. A blood pressure cuff tightened around her arm. A pulse oximeter clipped onto her finger. Someone drew blood. Ella tried to climb onto the gurney, but a nurse guided her back. "Sweetheart, we need a little space," the nurse said gently. "You can stand right here and hold her hand." Ella wrapped both hands around her mother's fingers and refused to let go. A doctor in green scrubs checked Nora's pupils and listened to her chest. "Severe exhaustion," he said. "Blood sugar is very low. She is dehydrated. Her body temperature spiked from overexertion. She has been like this for a while." He looked at Lucas. "She is lucky you brought her in when you did," he said. "If she had stayed unconscious another hour, we might be talking about organ damage. Or worse." The words hung in the bright, sterile air. They moved Nora to a small room upstairs. Machines beeped softly. Clear fluid dripped through in 4-line into her arm. An oxygen tube rested beneath her nose. Ella sat in a plastic chair beside the bed, her feet not quite touching the floor. She laid her head on the back of her mother's hand, her eyes red and swollen. Lucas sat in the corner, elbows on his knees, watching the rise and fall of Nora's chest. Outside the window, snow slid down the glass in slow, melting streaks. He had read thousands of reports in his life. Market forecasts, labor cost analyses, efficiency breakdowns. The language had always been clean and distant. Overtime hours, extended shifts, temporary exceptions. Now he was looking at what those words actually meant when they landed on one human body. A nurse came in, checked the monitors, and left again. The room settled back into a heavy quiet. After a long time, Nora stirred. Her eyelids fluttered halfway open. She blinked against the light, and then turned her head slightly. Her gaze found Ella first. "Sweetheart," she whispered, voice hoarse. Ella lifted her head at once. "Mom," she choked out. "You scared me. You did not come home." Nora tried to push herself up. "I have to get back," she said. "They will fire me if I miss a shift." "I did not mean to fall asleep. I just needed a minute. I have to go." She fumbled for the 4-line as if she could pull it out and walk straight back to the factory. "Stop," the doctor said firmly, stepping closer. "You are not going anywhere tonight. You pushed your body past its limit. You need rest, fluids, and monitoring." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "I cannot miss work," she said. "They cut my hours last month. I have been covering for people, taking extra nights. No breaks. No sick days. I cannot lose this job. My daughter depends on me." Lucas stood and moved to the foot of the bed. For a moment he did not speak. He simply looked at her, really looked at her, not as a line in a report, but as a woman whose life had been bent around the needs of his factories. "You almost lost more than your job," he said quietly. "You almost lost your life." Nora noticed him fully for the first time. Her brow furrowed. "You are," she started, confused. "You are the man from the gate." "My name is Lucas Hale," he said. "You work at a facility that my company owns. Your daughter walked through a snowstorm and collapsed outside my house because you did not come home. That will never be acceptable to me." He stepped back, pulled his phone from his pocket, and walked to the corner of the room. His voice when he spoke was low, but there was steel in it. "I want every shift log from Riverside for the last 12 months on my desk within the hour," he said. "I want time cards, camera access records, supervisor reports. Effective immediately, no employee in any Hale industrial facility is allowed to work more than 10 consecutive hours. Mandatory breaks every 4 hours. Night shift practices are to be audited across all plants. Start with Riverside and expand from there." Someone on the other end began to protest about deadlines. "I do not care about excuses," Lucas said. "I care that a woman nearly died on a concrete floor because no one stopped her from working herself into the ground. Fix it." He ended the call. When he turned back, Ella's eyes were on him, wide and searching. He walked to her chair, bent to pick up the thin blanket that had slipped from her knees, and tucked it back around her legs. "You are not going to lose anything," he said, looking from Ella to Nora. "Not your job. Not your home. Not each other." His jaw tightened. "Not while this has my name on it." Nora stared at him, tears sliding silently down her face. In that small hospital room, with machines humming and snow pressing against the glass, a different kind of storm began to shift. For the first time, the man at the very top was not just counting the cost in dollars. He was counting it in heartbeats. By Monday morning, something had shifted in the world that spun around the Riverside assembly plant. It did not start on the factory floor. It started in inboxes. An internal message from headquarters landed in every email account tied to Hale Industrial Holdings. Supervisors read it first, then line workers who checked their phones on breaks. Some employees sat down hard on plastic chairs when they saw the sender. From Office of Lucas Hale subject, immediate changes to workplace policy. The words were simple. Maximum shift length reduced. No more than 10 consecutive hours on any line. Mandatory rest breaks every 4 hours. All night shift practices to be reviewed by outside auditors. A new emergency health fund to cover medical care for workers injured or taken ill on the job. A support program for single parents, with flexible scheduling and access to counseling. Most people read the message twice. Some thought it was a mistake or a public relations move that would fade after a week. A few workers at Riverside looked at each other over the noise of the machines and whispered one name. Nora. They had watched her push through night after night. They had seen her steady hands when others shook. They had noticed when she did not come in, and then they had gone back to their stations because the line could not stop. Now, in a hospital room across town, Nora Morgan sat propped up against a thin pillow, completely unaware of the storm she had set off. The monitors beside her beeped at a calmer pace. Color had returned slowly to her face, and force still dripped into her arm, and a dull ache sat in the back of her skull, but the dangerous edge had passed. Ella sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed, drawing in a small notebook someone had brought. Her tongue poked out slightly as she concentrated on getting the shape of a scarf just right. A soft knock sounded at the door. An elegantly dressed woman stepped in, carrying a cream-colored envelope embossed with a silver H. "Ms. Morgan?" she asked. Nora pushed her hair back, suddenly self-conscious of the hospital gown and the blanket pulled over her legs. "Yes," she said. "That is me. I am from Mr. Hale's office," the woman said. "He asked me to bring this to you personally." She held out the envelope. Nora took it with careful fingers. Her name was written on the front in neat black ink. She opened it and unfolded the paper inside. Her eyes moved over the words slowly. A formal offer of employment. A position as an administrative assistant in a community outreach division at Hale Industrial Holdings. Part-time to start. A regular salary that was higher than what she made working full nights at the factory. Health insurance. Paid time off. Hours that would allow her to walk Ella to school in the mornings and tuck her in at night. "I think there has been a mistake," Nora said, her voice shaking. "I do not have a degree. I have never worked in an office. I put things together on a line." "The offer is correct," the woman said gently. "Mr. Hale will explain the rest. He has asked if you would meet with him when you are released to discuss it in person." Later that week, When the doctor finally agreed she was strong enough to leave, Nora found herself riding an elevator up a glass tower downtown. The lobby of Hale Industrial Headquarters did not feel like the factory. It was all marble floors and tall windows and quiet, expensive air. Nora had borrowed a plain blouse and skirt from a neighbor. She kept smoothing her hands over the fabric, worried it was all wrong. Ella walked beside her, her small hand wrapped around Nora's fingers. Her eyes were wide, taking in the artwork and the rows of plants. A receptionist directed them to the top floor. When the elevator doors opened, the view took Nora's breath away. The city stretched out in every direction, streets and roofs dusted with leftover snow. Floor-to-ceiling windows turned the skyline into a moving painting. Lucas Hale's office sat at the end of the hall. He stood when they entered. He was in a dark suit this time, tie squared, but there was a softness in his eyes that had not been there at the factory or the hospital. Behind him, shelves held books, awards, and framed photographs from earlier parts of his career. "Ms. Morgan," he said. "Ella, thank you for coming." Nora held up the letter with unsteady fingers. "There must be someone more suited than me," she said. "I am not used to these kinds of rooms. I am not used to any of this. I do not know why someone like you would care about someone like me." Lucas leaned his hands on the edge of the desk. "Because someone like you keeps my company standing," he said. "Because you gave everything you had until your body shut down on a cold floor. And because your daughter walked through a storm to make sure that did not become the end of your story." He nodded toward the chairs. "I do not need another person who knows how to talk about numbers," he continued. "I have plenty of those. I need someone who knows what it feels like to live on the other side of our decisions. I need your voice in the room when we build what comes next." Ella climbed into a soft chair in the corner. Someone had placed a beanbag there, and a small table stacked with colored pencils and picture books. She picked up a blue pencil and began to draw quietly. Nora looked from her daughter, safe and absorbed in her own world, back to the man behind the desk. Her heart pounded. She thought about the factory, the endless nights, the way her legs had buckled without warning. She thought about the hospital, the machines, the doctor saying, "Another hour." She thought about her little girl walking alone through the snow because there was no other option. She looked at the offer in her hands. For the first time, there was a path in front of her that did not run her straight into a wall. "I will try," she said softly. "If you are sure you want me here, I will try." Lucas nodded once. "I am very sure," he said. In that office high above the city, with snow still clinging to the streets below, a woman who had almost been lost on a factory floor took the first step into a different future. Nora's first day at the headquarters felt like stepping onto a different planet. The air smelled like coffee, and printer ink, and something floral and expensive. People in well-pressed shirts and tailored dresses moved with quiet purpose through the lobby. Their shoes clicked on polished floors. Glass walls reflected everything back like a movie. Nora smoothed her hands over the front of her borrowed blouse. She felt the rough edge where a seam had been mended twice. Her second-hand flats squeaked softly. Ella walked at her side, taking everything in with round, curious eyes. On the top floor, outside Lucas's office, someone had created a small corner that was clearly not there for executives. A soft blue beanbag sat under the window. A low shelf held picture books and coloring pads. A cup full of colored pencils waited on a tiny table. Ella walked straight to it. "Is this for me?" she asked, looking back at Nora. "For any guest," the receptionist said with a warm smile. "But I think you are the first to try it out." In the days that followed, the building began to adjust to Nora and Ella, and they began to adjust to it. Nora learned how to navigate the computer system, how to answer calls, how to schedule meetings for the community outreach team. She helped read through reports that were written about people she used to stand beside on factory floors. She asked questions that no one in that office had thought to ask, like how single parents were expected to make use of programs that did not match their realities. When she got overwhelmed, she would glance through the glass wall into the corner by Lucas's desk. Ella would usually be there, curled in the beanbag, coloring or reading. Sometimes she would be building tall, crooked houses from sticky notes and paper clips. Sometimes she would stand on tiptoe at the window and count the cars far below. Little by little, the brittle edge around Nora's shoulders eased. The building noticed Lucas changing too. One morning, on his way to a board meeting, he stepped into the elevator and found Ella there with one shoe untied. She looked down at the laces, then up at him. Without a word, he knelt, took the loose ends in his hands, and tied the shoe with the practiced precision of someone who had done it thousands of times, even though he never had. "Thank you, Mr. Warmcoat," Ella said, the nickname having stuck after that first night at the mansion. "Anytime," he replied. "We cannot have you tripping on the way to important coloring appointments." On another day, Ella sneezed 3 times in a row in the hallway. Lucas, in the middle of a conversation with an investor, reached into his pocket, handed her a tissue, and said with mock seriousness, "Bless you, ma'am," before continuing his sentence as if this was the most natural thing in the world. One evening, Nora stayed later than she meant to. She wanted to finish a report she had been asked to review, a draft of new guidelines for shift breaks. Her eyes grew heavy. Words blurred on the screen. At some point, she fell asleep sitting up in the chair in her small corner office, pen still in hand. Lucas found her there an hour later, the hallway outside quiet, most of the staff already gone home. He did not wake her. He slid out of his suit jacket, folded it in half, and laid it gently over her shoulders. Then he dimmed the lights, placed a glass of water on the edge of her desk, and motioned to the cleaning crew to keep their voices down as they passed. A junior analyst saw the whole thing from around a corner. She did not say anything, but the small smile that crossed her face said enough. In those quiet gestures, something began to change. Not just in the office, not just in Lucas, but in Nora as well. The tension that had lived in the back of her neck for years began to loosen. She started to stand a little taller when she walked through the lobby. Winter deepened outside. One morning, snow began to fall in slow, lazy flakes. By noon, the gentle drift had turned into a serious storm. The sky turned white. The city blurred. From the windows of the top floor, it looked as if the building was floating in a cloud. On the community outreach level, Nora worked against a deadline. She wanted to finish revisions on a proposal for a new support program before the end of the day. 2 floors up, Lucas prepared for a high-stakes meeting with major investors who had flown in despite the weather. In the lounge area, just down the hall from his office, Ella sat in a cushioned chair with her stuffed bear and a stack of coloring pages. Lucas's assistant sat nearby with her laptop. "Watch her for a bit, please," Lucas said to his assistant as he passed. "I will be back as soon as the meeting is over." "No problem, sir," the assistant replied, smiling at Ella. "We are going to be just fine." Things did not go as planned. The fire alarm shrieked to life without warning. Red lights began to flash along the ceiling. A recorded voice urged calm and directed everyone toward the nearest exits. The building had scheduled a drill, but the storm outside made the timing feel ominous. Nora looked up from her desk, heart pounding, and joined the stream of employees moving toward the stairwell. In the lounge, Lucas's assistant stood quickly. "Come on, Ella," she said. "We are going to go downstairs with everyone else for a few minutes. Your mom will meet us there." But in the confusion of moving bodies, raised voices, and buzzing alarms, no one noticed the small figure who paused at the doorway and looked back down the empty hallway. "Where's my mom?" Ella whispered, hugging her bear. She said she would come back. She slipped away from the group, following a path she had walked many times, down one flight of stairs and around a corner, past a side door that led to a loading dock. Outside that door, the storm raged. Snow and wind blurred the world into a wall of white. When the door pushed open, the cold hit her like a wall. She shivered but stepped out anyway, pulling her coat tight. Back on the main floor, after the all-clears sounded and employees began to filter back inside, Nora went straight to the lounge. The chair where Ella had been sitting was empty. The juice box on the low table was unopened. "Where is my daughter?" Nora asked, her voice sharp with sudden panic. The assistant's face drained of color. "She was just here," she said. "She was right here with me." Nora checked the hallway, the restrooms, the conference room. "No, Ella." Her breaths came faster. On the investor level, Lucas's phone buzzed in the middle of a presentation. One look at the message on his screen wiped every chart and number from his mind. Seconds later, he was in the lobby, coat half on. "She is gone," Nora said when she saw him, her voice breaking. "Ella is gone. No one knows where she went." "She would not just leave the building," Lucas said, already moving toward the security desk. "She knows better than that." He leaned over the guard's shoulder as they pulled up the camera feeds. There, on one screen, they saw her. Ella in her little coat and gray beanie, bare in her arms, walking down the side hallway. Another camera showed her pushing open the side door. 12 minutes ago. She was looking for you, Nora whispered, gripping the edge of the counter to stay standing. Lucas did not waste another second. He shrugged out of his heavy coat, letting it fall across a chair for speed, and pushed through the revolving doors into the storm. Snow swirled around him immediately, stinging his face, soaking his hair. Ella, he shouted into the white. Ella, where are you? He spotted a set of small footprints in the rapidly deepening snow, already beginning to blur. He followed them around the side of the building, down a short ramp, and into the shadow of the loading dock. A flicker of color caught his eye. A little red coat, wedged between two large metal bins, trying to escape the wind. He ran. Mr. Warm Coat. A small, shaking voice whimpered as he reached her. Ella sat huddled against the wall, knees to her chest, bear clutched so tight its stitched smile was pressed into her coat. Her cheeks were blotchy from cold and fear. Her hands were bare and pink. Lucas dropped to his knees in the snow. Oh, sweetheart, he breathed. He scooped her up, pressing her against his chest, wrapping his arms fully around her to shield her from the wind. Her body felt frighteningly cold. You scared me so much, he said, his voice unsteady in a way it never was in a boardroom. I thought I lost you. Ella buried her face in his shoulder. I could not find Mom, she whispered. I thought maybe she went outside. I did not mean to make you scared. He held her tighter. A moment later, Nora came skidding around the corner, nearly slipping on the ice. When she saw them knees beside them, snow soaking through her tights, she wrapped her arms around Ella and Lucas both, clinging as if the storm might still steal them away. I am so sorry, baby, she cried, pressing frantic kisses to Ella's cold cheeks. I am here now. I am so sorry. I should have been there. I should have watched you. Ella turned her face into her mother's scarf. I got scared, she said. The alarm was loud. I did not see you. I just wanted to find you. Lucas did not let go. He kept his arms around both of them, his body a barrier against the wind. Let us get inside, he said, forcing his voice to steady. We will get warm first. We can be scared later. They moved as one, Nora helping to steady Lucas's steps on the slick ground while he carried Ella. By the time they reached the lobby, his hair was dripping, his shirt clung to his shoulders, and his hands shook, not from the cold but from what almost happened. Inside, the air felt too bright and too warm all at once. Security staff rushed forward with blankets. Someone brought towels. The receptionist hustled them to a cluster of soft chairs away from the doors. Lucas sat down with Ella still in his lap. Nora dropped onto the cushion beside them. They wrapped Ella in a thick gray blanket until only her nose and eyes showed. Nora held her daughter's hands between her own, rubbing gently. A few moments later, a paper cup of hot cocoa appeared, steam curling in the air. Ella held it with help, sipping carefully. Nora brushed wet hair back from Ella's forehead again and again, as if to reassure herself that her daughter was truly there. I thought. Nora started, then stopped. Her voice broke. She tried again. For a minute, when they said they did not know where you were, I could not breathe. Ella looked up at her. I am sorry, Mom, she whispered. I did not mean to make you afraid. I just did not want you to be alone. Nora took a deep, shaking breath and looked across Ella's head at Lucas. His gaze met hers. There was no distance in his eyes now, no polished wall of power. I should have made sure she stayed put, he said. I trusted a system and an alarm instead of checking myself. I will not make that mistake again. He glanced down at Ella. You cannot run out into storms every time. You are scared, he said gently. But you also should not have to wonder if the people you love will come back. Ella leaned against him, her small body finally relaxing as the warmth began to sink in. Around them, the office continued to move. Phones rang. Elevators chimed. People walked past and pretended not to stare at the sight of their billionaire boss sitting soaked on a lobby chair with a child in his arms and a woman at his side, all three wrapped in blankets like a small island. After a while, the alarm became a story and the snow outside became just another winter storm. What did not fade was the way Lucas watched them. He stayed there until Ella's shivers had eased and her cheeks had turned pink again. He stayed until Nora's breathing steadied and the wild look in her eyes calmed. Only then did he speak again, his voice low. You too, he said slowly, as if he was hearing the words for the first time himself, have become my whole day. Nora blinked. He gave a short, almost disbelieving laugh under his breath. My entire day, he repeated. Meetings, markets, all of it. None of it has ever made my heart stop the way losing sight of her did. Or the way I felt when I thought you might walk out of that hospital and never look back." Nora looked from him to Ella, then down at her own hands. "This started because my daughter was scared and desperate," she said. "She walked to your house because she had nowhere else to go. I never wanted her to have to carry that kind of weight." Lucas shook his head. "She did not just carry weight," he said. "She carried a mirror. She held it up to everything I built and asked one simple question: where's my mom?" I needed to see that more than I knew. Ella yawned, the adrenaline wearing off. Her head grew heavy on his shoulder. "Are you mad at me?" she asked, eyes half closed. "No," he said at once. "I am not mad at you. I am grateful that I found you when I did. I am grateful that you trust me enough to come looking for me at all." He shifted her slightly so she could lean against both of them, her head resting against his chest and her legs draped over Nora's lap. The three of them sat that way for a long time, wrapped in borrowed blankets while the storm tapped against the glass. Outside, snow still fell on the city, covering streets and rooftops in white. Inside, in that small circle of warmth, something else was taking shape. It was not a contract or a policy or a headline. It was the beginning of a bond that none of them had planned for, but all of them needed. For the first time in a long time, Nora woke up and did not immediately feel the weight of a shift schedule pressing on her chest. There was no alarm set for before dawn, no rush to catch a bus, no panic over whether she would be late. Lucas had insisted. 2 days, he had said firmly before they left the office building after the storm. "You take 2 full days off. Paid. Non-negotiable. You both need to let your bodies and your minds remember what rest feels like." Now, weak winter light slipped through the thin curtains of their small apartment. The radiator clanged and hissed. The air was warm, not from a corporate heating system, but from the simple fact that the bill had been paid on time for once. Nora lay on the couch with Ella curled against her. A cartoon played softly on the television. A blanket covered them from neck to toes. A mug of tea cooled on the table. Ella sipped hot chocolate from a chipped mug, her small hand wrapped around the handle. For a while, they did nothing but breathe. Just before noon, there was a knock at the door. Nora frowned, surprised. She set her mug down and stood. Ella peeked over the back of the couch, her braids sticking up. On the other side of the door stood a delivery man holding a large woven basket wrapped in clear cellophane and tied with a silver ribbon. A small white envelope was attached to the front. "For Nora Morgan," he said, checking the label. "That is me," she answered. He handed her the basket and left. Nora set it carefully on the table and opened the envelope. Inside was a simple card with neat handwriting. "Rest," it read. "This world needs mothers like you, and girls like Ella need you strong. L.H." Her throat tightened. Inside the basket were thick thermal socks, a soft fleece blanket, several boxes of Nora's favorite tea, a jar of honey, a tin of simple butter cookies, and, tucked near the back, a brand new sketchbook and a pack of bright crayons. Ella reached for the sketchbook at once. "It smells like Mr. Warm Coat," she said matter-of-factly, pressing her face against the cover. There was a faint trace of the same clean scent that clung to the halls of the headquarters. Nora laughed once and wiped at the corner of her eye before her daughter could see. They spent most of the day exactly as the note had asked them to, resting, warming their feet in new socks, wrapping themselves in the new blanket, reading stories, watching the snow drift by the window instead of fighting through it. In the afternoon, Ella became oddly serious. She gathered cardboard from an old cereal box, glue, bits of ribbon, and the new crayons. She cleared a space on the floor and worked with a focus Nora usually only saw when homework was involved. "What are you making?" Nora asked. "It is a surprise," Ella said, not looking up. "Do not look yet." Nora smiled and turned back to her book, pretending not to watch. An hour later, Ella stood in front of her, holding something behind her back. "Now you can look," she announced. She handed over a crooked but colorful card. On the front, drawn with surprising care, were 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small. They stood under falling blue and white dots that represented snow. The small figure wore a bright red coat. Above their heads, in uneven but determined letters, Ella had written, "Happy day, Mr. Warm Coat. We like you so much." "But it is not his birthday," Nora said softly. "I know," Ella answered. "But I do not know when his birthday is. Maybe he did not get one. Now he does. The next morning, when Nora returned to the headquarters, she carried the card in a protective plastic sleeve a neighbor had given her. Ella walked beside her, clutching her bear and her new sketchbook. They stopped outside Lucas's office. Nora took a steadying breath and knocked. "Come in," his voice called. He was at his desk, reading a report. He looked up when they entered, and the usual professionalism in his posture shifted into something warmer. "How are you both feeling?" he asked. "Better," Nora said. "Rest helped more than I thought it would." Ella stepped forward, holding out the card with both hands. "This is for you," she said. "Thank you for the basket. And for finding my mom. And for finding me." Lucas took the card as if it were made of glass. He studied the three figures, the snow, the wobbly letters. His expression changed slowly, something in his chest clearly twisting. "How did I get so lucky to have you two walk up to my gate in a storm?" he said, almost to himself. Nora felt her face grow warm. "It did not feel lucky at the time," she answered honestly. He smiled, quiet and real. "Sometimes the best things start on the worst days," he said. He turned and, without hesitation, pinned Ella's card on the wall behind his desk, right between a framed magazine cover and a crystal award. It looked small next to them, but it drew the eye more than anything else on the shelf. Every person who walked into that office from that day on saw it. They did not all know the story behind it. But Lucas did. And for the first time in a long time, the thing on his wall he valued most was not a sign of profit or power. It was a crayon drawing from a 6-year-old girl who had trusted him enough to knock on his door in the snow. Winter slowly began to loosen its grip on the city, but it left something behind. People talked differently in the halls of Hale Industrial. Supervisors checked schedules twice before approving overtime. Break rooms got new chairs and better coffee. Flyers went up about the new support program for single parents. At Riverside, workers who had once dragged themselves home now found they could breathe between shifts. In headquarters, the card from Ella stayed on Lucas's wall, bright and small between glass awards and heavy frames. Everyone who came into his office saw it. Some glanced at it and smiled without knowing why. Others had heard enough whispers to know that the drawing had more power than any stock certificate hanging beside it. By the time the company's annual charity gala arrived, the story had already begun to move quietly through the building. People did not know all the details, but they knew enough. They knew their billionaire boss had carried a factory worker out of a break room. They knew he had changed policies in the middle of the night. They knew he had started to show up in places where executives rarely went. The gala was held downtown in a glass atrium. Strings of warm lights hung high overhead, reflected in the polished floor. Tables were set with white linens and simple centerpieces. Guests arrived in formal wear, donors and partners, and employees chosen for recognition. Nora stood near the back of the room in a borrowed dark blue dress. She felt awkward and exposed, but Ella squeezed her hand, her eyes wide with delight at the sparkling lights. Lucas had insisted they attend. When the chatter quieted and the music faded, Lucas walked onto the small stage at the front of the room. He wore a black suit and a tie the color of midnight. Behind him, a wide screen glowed. "Thank you all for being here," he said into the microphone. His voice carried easily, steady and calm. "Most years, this event is about numbers. How much we donated. How many programs we funded. How many lives our foundation touched." He glanced back at the screen and nodded to the technician. The image changed to falling snow, then to a simple factory line, then, slowly, to a picture that made Nora's heart stop. Ella's card filled the screen. 3 stick figures under falling snow. A small figure in a red coat. The words, "Happy day, Mr. Warmcoat. We like you so much." People let out soft murmurs. "This year," Lucas said, "I want to tell you a story instead." He did not use their names at first. He did not need to. He spoke of a winter storm. Of a little girl who walked alone through the snow because her mother did not come home. Of a woman who pushed herself past every limit to keep a roof over their heads. Of a system that had looked the other way until it was almost too late. He spoke of a break room floor and an emergency room and an elevator ride to a new kind of job. He spoke of a card, made with cardboard and crayons, that reminded him what leadership was supposed to be. "Leadership is not just about what we build," he said. "It is about who we protect. It is about whether the people who keep our lights on and our lines moving feel seen when they are at their weakest." He turned, looked straight toward the back of the room. "Nora Morgan," he said, his voice clear. Would you join me up here? Heads turned. Applause rose like a wave. Nora froze for a second. Then Ella tugged at her hand. Go, Mom, she whispered. He is talking about you. With her heart pounding, Nora moved through the crowd toward the stage. The lights felt too bright. Her hands felt empty without a clipboard or a box to carry. When she reached the steps, Lucas offered his hand to help her up. She stood beside him, facing the room. For a moment, the sight of so many faces almost sent her back down again. But she felt small fingers slip into hers. Ella had followed and now stood a little behind her, close enough to touch. Lucas stepped back and gave Nora the space in front of the microphone. She swallowed. I am not used to microphones, she said, her voice shaking just enough that the room leaned in. I am not used to stages or dresses like this, or anyone clapping when I walk into a room. A gentle ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. I am just a mom, Nora continued. I am someone who stood on cold floors for a very long time and tried to be enough for someone small who depended on me. I thought that was all I would ever be allowed to be. She glanced at Lucas, then at Ella. Somehow, she said, I found myself working for a man who made me feel like being that was enough. More than enough. The applause this time was louder, warmer. Lucas stepped forward with something small in his hand. It was a simple white rose pin. He fastened it carefully to the front of her dress, just above her heart. You deserve to stand tall, he said quietly, the microphone catching just enough of the words for the front rows to hear. Every mother does. Nora felt the weight of the pin, light and real. For the first time in her life, under bright lights and dozens of watching eyes, she believed him. After the gala, the mansion on the hill did not feel quite as distant as it once had. One Friday evening, a few weeks later, Lucas called Nora with an invitation that made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with work. Come for dinner, he said. Nothing formal. No gowns. No speeches. Just food and the three of us not rushing anywhere for a change. The house was still grand when they arrived, but it felt different now. Warmer. Lights glowed from the kitchen instead of only from the tall windows of the study. The smell of garlic and tomatoes drifted down the hallway. In the kitchen, Lucas stood at the stove in a rolled-up dress shirt and an apron that did not match him at all, stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce. Ella stood on a stool beside him, wearing an apron that fell almost to her ankles, solemnly sprinkling shredded cheese into a bowl. Chef Ella, Lucas said, tasting the sauce. How is our masterpiece coming along? It is very red, she announced. And it has the good smell. Then I think we are on the right track, he replied. They ate in the living room, not at the long formal table that could have seated 20. Bowls of pasta balanced on their laps, cartoon reruns playing softly on the large screen. Ella slurped noodles and laughed with her mouth full. Nora sat barefoot on a floor cushion, her hair pulled back, more relaxed than Lucas had ever seen her. When the movie ended, Ella ran back to the kitchen to look for more popcorn. The room grew quiet. Lucas glanced at Nora, his expression open in a way that would have shocked anyone who only knew him from business magazines. I used to think I was too busy for a family, he said. Too focused. Too careful. I told myself there was no room for anyone else in the life I built. He swallowed once. Now I find myself listening for your footsteps in the hallway, he continued. I wait to hear her laugh outside my office door. If I go a day without seeing you both, the building feels wrong. Nora looked at him, not with disbelief, but with something gentler. Hope and fear, tangled together. You did not have to fix our life, she said quietly. You already changed so much. You could have stopped there. Lucas shook his head. I did not fix it, he said. You did that. You showed up. You fought. You walked into rooms you were never invited into and made them better by being in them. All I did was open some doors. Ella returned and flopped down between them with a bowl of popcorn. She leaned back against Lucas's chest, her feet resting across Nora's legs as if that had always been their shape. If we lived here, she said casually, eyes on the ceiling, would I get pancakes every morning? Nora laughed, shaking her head. You would make this man broke on maple syrup, she said. Lucas smiled, his voice soft. If you lived here, he answered, we would figure out as many pancakes as you needed. Time moved on. Another month passed. The snow returned in soft, steady layers. One evening, Nora and Ella climbed the steps to the mansion again, this time at Lucas's request for a small gathering. When the front door opened, Warm air and the sound of quiet conversation washed over them. Employees from the outreach team, a few neighbors, and some of the staff she recognized from the house stood in the main room with cups of cider. What took Nora's breath away were the walls. Everywhere she looked, photographs had been framed and hung. Ella asleep in the beanbag chair in Lucas's office. Nora laughing at something off camera in the break room at headquarters. The three of them in the lobby wrapped in blankets after the fire alarm. A blurry picture of them in the park, all three mid-laugh. "You kept these?" Nora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did not just keep them," Lucas said. "I collected them. These were the days when I started to feel like myself again." The room grew quiet as he turned to face everyone. "Some people walk into your life in the middle of a storm," he said, raising a glass of cider, "and they end up becoming your shelter." Then he set the glass down, took a steady breath, and lowered himself to one knee in front of Nora and Ella. Gasps rippled through the room. He held a small, simple ring in his hand. It was not flashy. It was elegant and clear. He looked at Ella first. "You walked up to my gate with one question," he said. "Where is my mom?" Then he turned his eyes to Nora. "Today I have my own question," he said, his voice steady but full. "Will you both let me come home with you every day for the rest of our lives?" For a second, Nora could not speak. Tears blurred her vision. Ella pressed both hands to her mouth. "Say yes, Mom," Ella burst out. "Please say yes." Nora laughed through the tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes." Lucas stood and slid the ring onto her finger. Then he opened his arms, and both Nora and Ella stepped into them at the same time. Around them, people wiped their eyes and clapped, not because their billionaire boss had made another deal, but because he had finally chosen a different kind of life. Later that night, the three of them sat in the back seat of Lucas's SUV in front of Nora's building. Snow fell steadily outside, tapping against the windows. The apartment above them glowed softly. Nora leaned against his shoulder. Ella dozed across both their laps, one hand wrapped around her bear, the other resting on the new ring. Lucas looked at Nora and smiled. "Get in," he said quietly. "This time, let me take you home." She turned toward him, her eyes still bright with tears, but shining. "Only if there are pancakes tomorrow," she replied. He laughed. "Every morning," he said. The car pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the snowy night. Behind them stood a building that had once been only a place to survive. Ahead of them waited something far rarer than wealth: belonging. Thank you for joining us for this cinematic adventure. If you want more untold or real stories of billionaire love and redemption, please subscribe and choose your next true heart journey on your screen now.